What's up YouTube, Adriel here with another video. If you don't know me, I'm a DevOps engineer who's always striving to learn new things. On this channel, I share things I learn, tips and tricks, how-tos, and reviews of software and hardware technologies that I use. In today's video, we're going to talk about how I connect to my home network, and by extension, my home computer, securely while being out and about, using dynamic DNS and Open VPN. With that being said, let's get into it. In my previous overview of mobile shell clients, which I'll link up above here, I talked about how I came across those two shell applications because I wanted to implement my iPad as my daily driver and laptop replacement. But I still needed to be able to access my home computer to be able to do certain development tasks while on the road that I just am not able to get done on an iPad. So I knew that a simple solution would be just to open up port 22 on my router and on my computer and allow myself to directly SSH into my computer. Bad idea though, because that presents a security risk. All a malicious user would need in order to gain access to my computer would be my username and password. And when you open up ports like that, you're opening yourself up to a lot of brute force login attempts because there's people out there that utilize bots and scripts that regularly ping ports and will try to brute force log in if they find an open port. So that wouldn't just mean that I'm opening up a connection, but I'm allowing people to try to attempt to make that same connection and try to log into my computer directly. And that could be hundreds or thousands of connections per day. There are things that can mitigate that. For example, you can use a tool like fail to ban that will ban the IPs of people that continue to try to log in and fail to log in multiple times. And those tools are definitely handy to implement because they do add an extra layer of security. But just because those tools exist doesn't mean that I want to open up port 22 for access to the world. Instead, I went with OpenVPN and NoIP. So first, let's talk about what is OpenVPN. VPNs have been in the news a lot lately, and a VPN stands for a virtual private network. All right, so let's think of an example. Let's say you want to go to your local coffee shop and use their internet. And they have a password on it, but they give it out to everybody. So everyone and their brother can connect to the local coffee shop's Wi-Fi. Anyone that's on that network can pretty easily intercept your traffic. And if there's no password on the network, then that makes it even worse. In come the hype of VPNs. At a high level, VPNs create virtual tunnels across your network, and these tunnels are encrypted. So it keeps your traffic and your bits relatively safe from prying eyes. This allows you to be safer on public networks. In my case, it allows me to connect to a network without having to open up a direct connection to the 22 SSH port. Instead, I get to just connect to my VPN, and then it's like I'm already on my network and able to hit the remote machines that exist within my home network. The thing about your internet is that ISPs usually don't give you a public IP address by default. And that's something that you need if you want to publicly connect to your home network. And if they do give you a IP address, usually it's not static unless you want to pay for it. So they'll give you something called a dynamic IP address, which means that it can change based on whenever they want to change it. In comes NoIP. Essentially, NoIP points a domain name to your IP address, but they also offer a utility that when your IP address changes, it will automatically update that CNAME record and immediately point that record to the new IP address. So at any point in time that it changes, you'll still be able to connect to that same domain name instead of having to have that public IP address. All right, so now that we have that recap, let's go ahead and jump on in and take a look at the basic configuration on how to get this set up. So for this recap, there's a couple things that I had to do to get this set up to work. So first of all, I want to preface this by saying that I use an Orbi router, and that is made by Netgear. The basic configuration that I'm about to show you really works for Netgear routers, and it may differ for your specific router. Secondly, I purchased a 1-year license from NoIP, as I mentioned before. However, the free version of NoIP should work for you as well. And then third, I called my ISP to actually get them to give me a dynamic public IP address because I did not have a public IP address by default. But because they were giving me a dynamic one, that was also free. So once I had my public IP address, I went ahead and went on over to noip.com. I created an account, and once I had my account, I created a host name. So I went over to dynamic DNS and I went to NoIP host names, create host name, added a host name, mycoolhost. So they've got a lot of different options here that you can pick from, but you would just create, whatever your host name is that you want. And then you're just gonna make an A record on here where it points to your specific IP address. So additionally, I made sure to download their DUC utility, which stands for Dynamic Update Client. What this does is it connects to your computer and you can run it. And as you can see, it automatically updates the DNS record to make sure it's always pointing to the proper IP address. From here, I went to my routerlogin.net, which is a Netgear specific URL. And I logged into my router, of which I do not know the password. I went to the Advanced tab, went to Advanced Setup, and Dynamic DNS. From here, I made sure to select Use a Dynamic DNS service, which you can even show the status here. I selected NoIP.com, which actually this was a big reason why I used NoIP, because this was something that a tool that they already recommended via Netgear. I entered my host name and my username and password so that it can connect to my NoIP account. And then I selected Apply. Now from there, I had to do the VPN configuration so that I could be able to connect to the VPN, and that's how I'll connect to my home network. So I went to VPN service and I said enable VPN service. And then I selected the OpenVPN configuration package for download. So I selected the smartphone one because I was going to use an iPad. And what it will do is once you've got it configured, you'll download this package, you'll transfer this over to your iPad, and you'll set it up in the OpenVPN client. And then I just left these defaults. However, TCP is going to be more secure. And of course, you can always make sure that your ports, you can make really unique ports. But one thing to be clear about is even if you change the ports, people are going to use port scanners. And so that means they'll be able to figure out which ports are open, right? So even if you try to do security through an obscurity type deal, it's not going to work here when you start doing different ports, because people can find those ports. There's only so many ports you can have, and they can scan the whole range. So one additional thing that I did was I added an address reservation here so that the IP, the internal IP of my Mac Mini always stays the same on my network. Because usually things are set up to be dynamic by default when devices connect, and so that IP can also change. However, I've given it a static IP address on my internal network so that I can always connect to it. Once I've transferred the file over to my iPad that I downloaded from my router for the OpenVPN configuration, I was then able to download the OpenVPN app. Here you would load your file and then it would automatically configure it. You pull your file down from the router, and then once you go back to it, I'm actually connected to my iPhone's network. So I'm just hotspotting via my iPhone right now, and I'm gonna go ahead and connect to my VPN by turning it on. And as you can see, it tells you your private IP and your public IP address and what port you're connected to and the protocol that you're connected via. Again, I'd recommend going with TCP because it's a little bit more secure. But let's see if I can actually SSH in to my home computer. We're gonna open up Blink again and clear this and SSH into my Mac Mini. I am SSH'd in here and I can do my various development tasks. If I want to run, some PowerShell script or Python script or whatever, right? Like I can open up my Vim, my development environment. I can start running scripts. I can run Docker containers. So this setup was basically a no-brainer for me. It alleviated some of my security concerns. It allowed me to basically for free connect to my home network securely and make sure that all my packets were encrypted. Plus, OpenVPN is an open source standard for VPNs. It has actually been highly regarded as probably one of the most secure VPNs. Now, is it a perfect solution? No, certainly not. I mean, I just showed you guys that I was using UDP instead of TCP. Now, while both protocols technically should be okay, TCP is preferred. I'm not doing the preferred method. And of course, is any solution perfect? No, not at all, right? So this, I'm sure someone out there could probably hack this, and they could probably hack most things, right? Like there are very talented people out there. But then again, a lot of hacking all starts with social engineering. So everything that you do needs to be with security in mind. All right, enough of that rant. If you liked this video, give me a thumbs up. If you disliked it, tell me why. If you want to learn more, if you have a comment, please leave me some comments down in the comment section below. And if you want to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I'll catch you in the next one. Just one disclaimer here, this video was not sponsored by NoIP, it was not sponsored by OpenVPN, it was not sponsored by anything at all. These are just tools that I use personally and come to really enjoy them, and so that's why I'm sharing them with you. But yeah, disclaimer, nothing here, but this is not a sponsored video. And thanks for watching.